Tonight, live from Channel 4, the local station, the Jacksonville mayor's race and the critical issues impacting our community. As we look to the future, our panel of experts ask the questions that matter most to residents. Candidate Donna Deegan joins us to share her long-term vision for the River City. This is Your Vote 2023 Mayoral Candidate Forum.
And good evening to you. Hello, everyone. In just under 2 weeks, it's going to be Election Day in Jacksonville, and the city's voters are going to choose the new mayor for the next 4 years. Tonight, we've come together with other local media organizations, First Coast News, WJCT 89.9, and the Florida Times Union to help you learn about the candidates asking for your vote. In a few moments, we'll be talking with Democratic mayoral candidate Donna Deegan. We extended repeated invitations to Republican Daniel Davis, who declined to participate tonight. Before I introduce our panelists for this evening, here's Rick Mullaney, Shercliffe Executive Director of the Jacksonville University Public Policy Institute, one of our partners for tonight's forum.
Good evening. Good evening. On behalf of the Jacksonville University Public Policy Institute and leading journalists in North Florida, welcome to this evening's Mayoral Candidate Forum. We hope tonight's forum will be informative and help you in casting your vote. In January, WJCT and the Institute planned 2 televised debates in the mayor's race, one for March 8th for the first election, and tonight, May 3rd, for the runoff election. The dates for both debates were discussed with the candidates at that time. On March 21st, the first election, candidates Donna Deegan and Daniel Davis advanced to the runoff election on May 16th. In March, we invited both candidates to the May 3rd debate. Donna Deegan accepted. Daniel Davis did not respond immediately and was asked to suggest another date if he had a conflict, and WJCT would seek to accommodate it. He declined the invitation and 2 more invitations to participate. After Mr. Davis declined the invitations, the debate was changed to a forum, and leading local journalists were invited to participate as panelists. WJCT also invited Mr. Davis to participate in the forum, and he declined. While we hoped for the participation of both candidates, we are very pleased to have Mrs. Deegan here for this important discussion. With a $1.6 billion a year budget, more than 8,000 employees, and leading the only consolidated government in Florida, the mayor of Jacksonville is one of the most significant elected offices in the state and plays a leading role in shaping Jacksonville's future. On behalf of the Public Policy Institute, I want to thank Donna Deegan for her participation, the journalists for their historic collaboration in conducting this mayoral forum, and all of you for watching. Welcome to tonight's Mayoral Candidate Forum.
Thank you, Rick. All right, now I want to introduce the other journalists who will be asking questions this evening. Anthony Austin is the evening anchor for First Coast News. Now, Donna Deegan is married to First Coast News chief meteorologist Tim Deegan. Tim is not a part of any of the editorial decisions involving the station's political coverage. Melissa Ross, the host and producer of First Coast Connect on WJCT Public Media. And Nate Monroe has covered City Hall as a beat reporter, investigative reporter, and Metro columnist for the Florida Times Union for the past decade. That is our panel tonight. And the candidate who chose to participate in tonight's forum calls herself a proud Jacksonville native. Donna Deegan, an award-winning former television news anchor, 3-time cancer survivor, and a nonprofit executive. So welcome and thank you for joining us tonight.
Well, thank you so much for the opportunity. I appreciate it, and I'm reminded of how much perhaps I might rather be on the other side asking the questions as I used to do. But no, I'm really thrilled to be here. Thank you.
Instead of a formal kind of opening statement, why don't you go ahead and tell us what you would accomplish in the first year if you're elected, and what Jacksonville would look like at the end of your term as mayor?
Well, you know, I've thought about this for so long because I just believe that we're stuck. We're stuck in a rut, and we have been here for a really long time. And one of the reasons that I'm running for mayor is because I think it's really time that we take down the wall between our citizens and our city government. There's been a wall there for quite a long time. We've made it very difficult to participate in our city government for our citizens. And frankly, to make this city a city that does not hew toward just a handful of folks, but that brings everybody in and gives everybody an opportunity for the same quality of life. So one of the very first things that I would do when I become mayor is I'm going to throw open the blinds and let the sunshine in. I think we have a city government that has lacked tremendously in transparency. That is not a secret. This city government is frankly renowned for its levels of corruption. And it's time for people to be able to see inside and to participate. So we're going to take all those boards that I have the opportunity to appoint, and we're going to diversify them and make them look a lot more like Jacksonville. we're going to activate those boards so that we can make our citizens a meaningful part of the process. And then I'm going to get to work on the 3 pillars of my campaign. And those are infrastructure, because we have spent many years kicking the can down the road on the vital infrastructure that we need to make this city successful. Healthcare, because we have the worst health outcomes in the state of Florida, including the worst by far maternal and infant mortality numbers. So I've got a 4-point plan to deal with that. And then economic empowerment. We're going to make sure that we focus very heavily on small business, bringing small business opportunities, especially to our neglected neighborhoods. And I look forward to discussing all of that and more with you all tonight.
Let's talk about the 3 pillars that you just mentioned. Fixing crumbling infrastructure, working on better health outcomes for the city, building an economy that works for everyone. Now, you mentioned small business. Can you tell us specifically how would you open up more opportunities to small business in Jacksonville, and how would you create more economic opportunities for more people?
Well, listen, I want to make sure that I say that I've got nothing against big business. Big business just doesn't need much of a megaphone in this city, because they, especially our big developers, they've got a bullhorn here. So I think that to focus on small business, which really is the engine of our city, you know, I come from a family of small business people. My great-great-grandfather, when he came here, had a small business. My grandfather had a restaurant on Ashley Street. My uncle has had a restaurant downtown for 45 years. I come from a family of entrepreneurs, and I think that really is the lifeblood of the city. And what we've done is we've made it extraordinarily hard for small business people to do business here. From the time I got into this campaign a year and a half ago, I have met with small business after small business after small business, and I hear over and over again, or folks who have gone out of business. It took me a year, 2 years, 3 years to get my permits to go into business. It's such a bloated, awful process to try to do business in this town. And then you get into certain segments of town where you don't really have the CPACs that are so, the community organizations that are so powerful. And you see a lot of disconnect. So what I'd like to do is go into those communities which need some economic revving of those small business engines, and let's make sure we can connect them with the same things that a lot of these other communities have. Connect them to incubator programs. Maybe use some of these buildings that are just sitting around for incubator programs for small business. Let's connect them to facade grants so that they can make their businesses look better. Let's introduce them to some tools that they might be able to use, like business improvement districts. They would have to choose that, but that would be something that could help them keep some of their tax dollars in their neighborhoods, as opposed to sending them out to so many other neighborhoods that seem to always get more love than they do. So I think there are a lot of things that we can do, but small business to me is such a key, and I believe in Jacksonville could be the small business hub of the Southeast. I really do, if we just focus on it a little bit and make it easier.
Let's talk more about moving the city forward. So if you're elected as mayor, you will be the first Democrat elected in 12 years. So how will you reach across party lines and work with other elected officials in our city to move us forward? Well,
look, I think it makes a lot of sense to have some checks and balances in government, right? I think we have seen all across the political spectrum what has happened when you have a supermajority of one party that is constantly in power. You end up with a whole lot of people who are left behind, and you end up with a rule that often does not very well correlate to what the people want. So I think having checks and balances is a good thing. But I'll also tell you that both in my job as a journalist, where I had to bring everybody's voice into the room, make sure I was trying to bring all voices in and portray that in a way that is honest and forthcoming, and then my 20 years of work as a nonprofit leader, cancer is not a red or blue issue. So I've gotten very proficient at relationship building, and I think it's something that I've had a very easy time doing in my career. I think it's why I've been endorsed by people like Matt Carlucci, a Republican, and Mayor Ellen Glasser in Atlantic Beach, who is also a Republican. They don't see me as a hyper-partisan actor, because I really never have been. I don't think hyper-partisanism belongs in local city government. And so what I hope to do is create an administration that has Democrats, Republicans, and independents in it, so we really can bring this city together and make it work for everybody, but also give everybody a bit of a win. You got to have a vision that includes everybody, or what's going to happen every 4 years. You're going to be grabbing it back and forth.
Voters almost always rate public safety as a top concern.
Sure.
This election is no different. Now, the mayor does not manage the sheriff's office. The sheriff does.
Right.
But what would you do to help the sheriff manage and ideally reduce violent crime in the city? And how would that approach differ from the approach your opponent, Daniel Davis, would take?
Well, I think that, first of all, let me say that despite what you may have seen in a mailer near you or on a commercial, I want to fully fund our police department. I think the very first thing you have to do operationally is fund public safety. It's incredibly important, police and fire. So I will certainly do that. I look forward to working with our police department. I've done that my entire life, both when I was anchoring the news and through the foundation. I've always had a fantastic relationship with our police department. And in fact, when I met with the Fraternal Order of Police, when they were doing their interviews, I told them, I said, look, I know how this is going to go. I recognize who you're going to choose to partner with here in this election, but let me just say that when I am mayor, public safety will be top of mind for me. So I will say, first of all, I will fully fund our police. I will also go further, though, and make sure that we are getting underneath the causes of violent crime. I mean, we have a murder rate that is 4 times the murder rate of New York City. So we can't just continue to do the same thing over and over again and expect a different result. So what I would do is I would focus very heavily on things like literacy. 70% of the people in our jails are illiterate. If we can have a better literacy rate, right now it's around 47%, with some schools down around 19%, then we can reduce the number of folks that end up in our jails. I toured the jail about 4 months ago and talked to a lot of the folks that have been there for a long time working. First of all, they're understaffed. They need more staff in the jail. But the other thing they told me was, we have some amazing intervention and prevention programs that nobody ever funds. I want to fund those. What I would ideally like to do is keep a lot of folks out of jail as opposed to reacting once something has happened. And I think in almost all ways, if you can prevent something as opposed to trying to solve it once it's already happened, not only are you saving money, but you're saving lives.
And let's talk more about your relationship with our local law enforcement. As you mentioned about the mailers and the commercials, we've seen the commercials, the sheriff, T.K. Waters, mentioning that you're soft on crime and that his officers are going to be less safe due to your, quote, radical policies. So they say in those ads that you attended every Black Lives Matter rally and that you support a civilian review board to hold police accountable. Can you tell us a little bit more about that civilian review board and your plans?
Well, let me say, first of all, that I was at the same Black Lives Matter marches that Sheriff Waters was at, that Mayor Curry was at. Even my opponent had expressed support for those rallies back when they were happening. As far as the Civilian Review Board is concerned, and I said this when I met with the Fraternal Order of Police, I don't care what that looks like. What I'm trying to do is I'm trying to create better communication between our community and our police. There are 11 cities in Florida, including some very conservative ones, that have citizen review boards. And what we've seen in the data is that there is a 15% drop in the number of arrests of Black residents, and there's also a greater trust between the community and police. Now, I want to say this, because what those ads say and what the sheriff has said is that she's trying to be, or actually my opponent has said, she's trying to take charge of the police department, have somebody to take charge over the police department. That's not true at all. And in 2017, the Florida Supreme Court said you cannot have a civilian review board that has any authority over police. What I want to do, and I don't care what we call it, is I want to have some sort of a community board that can increase those difficult conversations that you have to have in order to create better relationships between police and the community. You know, we had that Safer Together committee. You guys remember that? Joyce Morgan and Tommy Hazuri put that together with the city council. The moment that got uncomfortable, the moment it got to where there were really uncomfortable conversations, that was it. Cut it off. You can't get ahead with this if you're not having uncomfortable conversations. And frankly, you know, as much as I support our police, I also think that our community deserves to be safe. I don't think a Black mama should have to worry every time her son walks out the door. And I hear all the time from the Black community, I have to talk to my kids every time they walk outside and say, please make sure you're respectful. Please make sure you don't. And look, that's just not okay. We've got to make those relationships better. So I'm sorry that's been cast the way it has, but I believe public safety is incredibly important, and I think both the community and the police have to play a role in that. I don't think there's anything wrong with accountability. And can I further say that Sheriff Nat Glover, who was in charge of the Jacksonville Journey, or implemented the Jacksonville Journey, which was a crime program that worked very well back when he was sheriff, came out in a television commercial that started today and said that he has seen enough of this divisiveness and lying talk, and that we need to unify and stop lying to get ahead in politics, in other words. And I think I was so grateful for him to do that, because we really have got to get to a point where we stop this political theater to just elect people and try to get along with each other and actually do something that makes us safer.
When you talk to law enforcement, they'll say you need a pie: prevention, intervention, and enforcement.
Right.
Of course, the Jacksonville Journey heavily focused on prevention and intervention.
Yes.
The kind of programs you just mentioned. Over the years, the Journey, which was having a positive impact in bringing down violent crime rates, slowly got defunded.
Yes.
Would you propose funding an ambitious initiative like that, or putting new funding into the programs that currently exist? And how would we pay for that?
Yeah, I think you can do it either way. I mean, I don't think I thought the Journey was incredibly successful. I mean, if you look at this, it focused on a very small area of very violent crime, and it's really the only thing that we have seen that has dramatically dropped those violent crime numbers. So not only literacy, but things like community organizations and food deserts and all those things that fold into poverty, which is really what often leads people to a life of crime. So whether we do that, whether we recreate the Journey, or whether we somehow fold that into the Kids Hope Alliance or some other program, I think that's going to require us to have public-private partnerships. I mean, that's one of the things I'm looking at in terms of the literacy program. Have community organizations that get involved like we did in the Journey. But it's also going to require Sheriff Waters to want to implement that community policing model again. So part of that will be a decision by police whether they want to do that or not. But I personally think that between the city that is growing, and so the funding that we get from that, community organizations, private businesses who are very motivated to solve some of these problems, I think we can come up with the money to do it.
We're going to come up against our first commercial here in just a couple minutes. So in the last 2 minutes of this segment, talk to me a little bit about the campaign that we know has been the most expensive in mayoral campaigning history in Jacksonville. It's also, some people say it's been the most negative. Do you believe this affects voter turnout, which was just 25% in that election in March? And what can be done to increase voter engagement?
Well, I can tell you that what we saw in the primary was just absolutely a bloodbath of terrible, negative commercials. And so, not that this was my decision from the beginning of the race. I was never going to participate in that, because I do think that it does hurt voter participation. I think people are so fatigued from it. And frankly, people deserve better than to be lied to and to be scared. I don't think fear ever gets us where we want to go. I think you have to bring people together. So quite frankly, to see my opponent now running an ad about unity is a little laughable, I've got to say. I mean, literally he has spent millions of dollars to trash first his Republican opponents and then me. And has not taken any accountability for anything that in our forums he has attended only the forums that have been friendly to him. I don't think he has tried to talk about anything controversial. It's been very, very difficult to get him to even cast a vision. I don't know what he stands for. So I personally just believe that the negative campaigning is detrimental to our city. I think you campaign like you lead, and I think you lead like you campaign. And so I would ask people to take a look at that. Which one of us is sharing a vision? Which one of us is trying to bring the community together? And which one of us has frankly decided that he wants to win at any cost, regardless of what the outcome may be?
All right, thank you. So we are just getting started with our Vote 2023 Mayoral Candidate Forum. Our panelists will dive into more topics when we come back in 2 minutes, to stay with us.
I would describe myself as a fighter. I'm John Morgan of Morgan & Morgan. For over 30 years, my fights have been against giants. I fight the powerful for the powerless, and our results speak for themselves. We have recovered billions and billions and billions of dollars for our clients. $1.2 billion in one case alone. I risk my own money in case cause fighting these wrongdoers. If you want a fighter, you can count on me. There's only one Morgan & Morgan for the people.
I can tell you with complete confidence that there is no other law school in the United States or anywhere in the world that gets its students into the courtroom sooner than the Jacksonville University College of Law.
Being downtown has been incredible. We're obviously in walking distance to the state courthouse, federal courthouse. We're surrounded by firms.
I've been able to network with many attorneys here within the city.
It's really been great to be fully immersed in the legal community in downtown Jacksonville.
Tracking last-minute birthday gifts? You're not alone. Tracking your kid's lost phone? You bet. Tracking your pizza? Yeah, that too. Tracking rain down to the minute so your family can still get outside? We do that every day. Chief Meteorologist John Gahn and The Weather Authority. Tracking when, where, and how weather will get in your way. Helping you get around it and keep your plans on track. The Weather Authority. Always watching, always tracking. Channel 4, the local station. It's the morning show's Mother's Day 1K grocery giveaway. If you're a mom or want to surprise a mom, watch the morning show starting Friday at 7:50 a.m. We'll ask you to post a photo of yourself on Snapjacks with a common household item. Take the pics, post it to the Mother's Day 1K channel on Snapjacks by 7 a.m. the next day. Watch at 7:50. If you see your Snapjacks photo, email insider@wjxt.com within 15 minutes for a chance to win a $1,000 grocery card.
And welcome back to our Vote 2023 Mayoral Candidate Forum. I'm joined by three other local journalists, Anthony Austin of First Coast News, Melissa Ross of WJCT, and Nate Monroe of the Florida Times-Union. We're speaking tonight with Democratic mayoral candidate Donna Deegan. Republican Daniel Davis was invited to participate but declined multiple invitations. Nate?
Mrs. Deegan, you and your opponent have both said that downtown development is a top priority. This reflects a bipartisan consensus in the city that has existed for decades.
Yeah.
What would you do differently than your opponent to spur growth and interest in downtown?
Well, look, you know, I think we have to call this like it is. And I want to start with the culture piece, because I think anybody who has ever run a business, have you heard that term? And I think it's been around for about 100 years, that culture eats strategy for lunch or for breakfast. I think that's what it is. Culture eats strategy for breakfast. And maybe lunch too, I don't know. But the bottom line is, if your culture is not good, if you don't have a good culture, if you don't have a collaborative culture, if you don't have a culture that brings people in, if you don't respect people's thoughts and have a good team, that no matter what the strategy is, you're not going to succeed. And the reason I bring that up is because I think the culture of this city, which has really been a culture of fear and division and petty punishment politics for anybody that doesn't hew toward the same handful of folks that seem to get every single thing in this city, you see over and over again. I have met with so many people inside City Hall who, by the way, are scared to death for me to ever mention that I have spoken to them, because they would either lose their job or they would be just hammered. That it doesn't matter who puts a bid in. It doesn't matter who comes through procurement. The same folks are going to get city business over and over again. Now, what does that have to do with development? Well, a lot. Because if you're not allowing more outside folks to come in, if you're not allowing the process to be truly competitive, I just don't know. If I look and I see what's happened is that we've been a city of renderings for 20 years. That's what people call us. We've had people like Tampa and Charlotte and Greenville and Nashville pass us by. We are spending the same type of money that Nashville is spending, but look at what is happening in their downtown and look at what's happening in our downtown. We continue to do the same things over and over again, and I think it starts with a culture problem, but also simply with the idea that we're going to protect this group of power brokers and everybody else is going to remain on the outside. And I just don't see how you are successful that way. And I will tell you, the very same people that are running Lenny Curry's City of Jacksonville will run Daniel Davis's organization. They're around him all the time. They are the people who advise him, and it will be the same toxic culture if he gets into City Hall. And it must change if we have any hope of having downtown development or frankly, any real growth in this city that makes sense.
So each of us has asked voters, viewers, listeners to weigh in and provide questions for tonight's forum. Here's a couple. Angela Rowland asks, what are you going to do to revitalize downtown? And then another of our viewers wants to know, what's your vision for creating a downtown environment which attracts young professionals to live there and invest in its growth? And I would just add to that, does your vision include Emerald Trail and walkability through and near downtown?
Oh my gosh, of course. I mean, what do you know about me, right? I love to move, and I think movement is life for people. We've got to create a community that has the opportunity to spend more time on their feet and on bicycles than we do in cars, right? So I absolutely love the Riverfront Parks program, those 19 connected parks. It's only 30% funded right now, though, so like so many other things, it will languish unless we actually are intentional about making sure that it happens. The Emerald Trail, the rejuvenation of McCoy's Creek and Hogan's Creek, those parks behind there, we have the opportunity to have something that is almost akin to a Central Park in downtown Jacksonville. And I'm really excited about that. I think that alone, if we activate that riverfront and people are out along the Emerald Trail and the development that will happen alongside of that, that's very exciting to me. And I think that in itself will bring development. But then you have to bring young people downtown. And I think that starts with creating both educational opportunities, arts and entertainment. I've had great conversations with the Cultural Council. They've done so much wonderful work. Their return on investment to the city is absolutely astronomical with their public art programs. We need to bring more culture, more arts. We need to support our arts downtown, and we need to create a living environment where kids can afford to live downtown, because kids want urban living. You know, every time I meet with a group of young people, they say we want to live downtown. You know, we want stuff to do downtown. So those are the types of things that you need to do, but it all has to happen in a way that will get us to a number that will start to make business take off. And we hear a lot about those numbers, but I don't think we're there yet. We got to get there.
So many people experience downtown when they come into the sports complex for a Jaguars game.
Right.
Let's talk about a potential new stadium deal, which could be in the neighborhood of $1 billion. The team is asking the city for half or even more of that money. You've said in past forums with your opponent that you would bring in an outside negotiator to sit down with the Jaguars and hammer out a deal. Taxpayers will be watching that very closely.
They will.
How will we afford such a deal, and why would you be the better executive than your opponent to broker such a deal?
Well, listen, you know, I think that a good CEO is somebody that can put all the best people in place to cultivate a vision, and then have the communication skills and the listening skills to bring people into that vision. I think I have those qualities. I think to expect Daniel Davis, who frankly was a champion of Lot J, which was really, most people may not remember that, but it was a deal that the Jaguars wanted that I think gave us 44 cents on the dollar as a return. It was a terrible deal for the city. And he couldn't wait to jump to support that deal. And he's telling us he's going to be a tough negotiator with the Jaguars. Look, I want to bring in the people that are used to dealing and negotiating with the NFL. That makes a lot of sense to me. Let's bring in the experts. Let's craft a deal that will be good for the city. I think we're going to need some public and private money for that. And I certainly think that if we end up investing in that as a city, we're going to have a bond issue. I mean, there's going to have to be some money borrowed. But hopefully between the Jaguars, the NFL, and a public-private partnership, I think we can get there. I don't think we want the Jaguars not to be in the city. They're a point of public pride, and they bring a lot to Jacksonville. And frankly, I like the fact that we own that stadium. I want to be able to maybe expand our college football presence here. I love the idea of maybe having a college playoff game here at some point. You have to, if you're a leader, you got to lead on these issues. And I think you have to look out. If you look out and we want to be a top tier city, I think we want that stadium.
Let's talk more about the stadium. So our viewers really want to know, where is the money coming from? But Robert Gupton, he asked, will you raise taxes and or fees to finance this new stadium? If not, where will the money come from?
I won't raise taxes, and I've already said that. That is not what we're going to do. But we will have to create a partnership, as I've said. It'll be hopefully a lot of private money will come in, because I know a lot of folks did that when we brought in the Jaguars. I think we'll make sure that whatever we do locally, it's obviously going to be an expenditure. I'm not going to deny that, but I'm not going to raise taxes to pay for it.
We don't know how much the stadium renovation is going to cost. We know it's going to be a lot, hundreds of millions of dollars. Public safety funding is a big ticket item.
It is.
You've talked about an openness to restoring pensions for public safety employees. That could be a big ticket item. Some of your priorities, infrastructure, big ticket item, affordable housing, could potentially big ticket item.
Mm-hmm.
How are you going to balance these priorities, particularly if you are ruling out new revenue? I mean, can you talk about...
I'm not ruling out new revenue. I'm not ruling out new revenue at all. What I have said repeatedly in this campaign, and again, I have spent a lot of time meeting with leaders not only in this city, but people who have run other cities. And this city, unfortunately, for the last 20 years has decided that we are allergic to any sort of federal grant money. We leave hundreds of millions of dollars, hundreds of millions in federal grant money on the table for political reasons. And I just think it is absolutely crazy not to go and get our tax dollars back. So one of the things that I will do is I will create a task force to look at creating a grant writing team that can go out and get us some of those tax dollars. There's so much money right now, Nate, for infrastructure. There's so much money for resiliency. There's a lot of what we want to do in this city that we could go and bring down those dollars for, and then we can use other dollars for other things. But we can't do it if we're closed off to that possibility. And I know what people say is, oh, well, there's strings attached to that money. Well, there are some federal grants that you don't want. But there are plenty out there. Key West brings in more grant money than we do. You know, I had this discussion with Mayor Glasser in Atlantic Beach. Atlantic Beach brings in a lot of grant money. We've got to start looking out at other streams of revenue, because I think right now, especially given where we came from COVID and all, to ask people right now to take more money out of their pockets, I think is a lot to ask. So I want to look at everything out there that we can do to bring revenue into this city, and I think federal and state grants are a way to do it.
I'm going to jump the line of some of what we proposed, and maybe Anthony, you'd ask the next question for us. But give us some examples of federal money that you think is left on the table because of political reasons. What are some examples?
Well, I'll just tell you, about 20 years ago, that was basically the decision. We used to bring in grant money here. We used to have grant writers that brought in a lot more money into our city. But we decided about 20 years ago, philosophically, we did not want to take that money. I think it's a matter of not liking who's in the White House or whatever the reason may be, or simply a philosophy that's big government somehow. It's just not. Those are our tax dollars, and we should get them back. So, for instance, you know, the infrastructure bill that was passed. There is so much money out there for things like drainage and septic tank removal and resiliency, where we're going to have to do so much to not only harden our shorelines, but make sure that we're creating the green infrastructure in our city that will make us resilient to what's coming down the pike. There's so much money available for that. We had a situation some months ago where there was a grant opportunity. I don't know if you remember, and I can't remember what it was called, but it was for cities where interstates had run through and basically decimated communities like we have had here. And the only reason that grant was applied for, and when it was actually applied for through Groundworks, was because there was so much that was made of it, that there was so much attention drawn to the fact that we weren't applying for it, that we applied for it. Why would we not go get that money? I don't know.
And we have another viewer question. This comes from Brian K. Jones. He wants to know, will you support raising the millage rate, or at very least keeping it the same, to help pay for needed services? Yeah,
I just said I don't think we need to raise it, but I don't see any reason to drop it either. What we saw in the last time that we did that, was a situation where, and look, I know sometimes you just have to give people confidence that your government is doing something to be helpful. But I think a lot of times what we do in this city is very performative. And especially when we get close to election time. There's a lot of performance that happens. And so I'm not saying that people don't need that money back in their pockets, but this latest millage reduction that we saw from the mayor saved the average homeowner $18. And it cost the city about $10 million at a minimum. So I just have to wonder in those situations, does that make sense? Maybe it does. Maybe at that point people just needed to have the confidence to see that gas prices were high or whatever it was and they wanted to see. But I think we have to very intentionally look at what kind of city do we want to have. Our millage rate is one of the lowest, if not the lowest in the state. And what's nice is because our city is growing at a good clip, we shouldn't have to raise it. We just have more people moving in here. And maybe we can look at that at some point. But right now I think that we have a very reasonable millage rate in Jacksonville.
All right, we've got time for maybe 2 more questions in this segment, and maybe Nate, I know you wanted to talk about a football game here in a moment, but let's start here. The legislature approved $75 million towards a new University of Florida campus in downtown Jacksonville. City Council has already approved a similar kind of investment, and leaders are calling this connection to UF a game changer. So how is that money well spent for taxpayers, and what do you see as a return on investment for something like that?
Well, again, this is the type of thing that I absolutely love to see, okay? I would love to see this happen with UNF and JU and EWU as well. I mean, whatever we can bring into downtown Jacksonville to have more students participating in educational programs, love that idea. I just don't know enough about what is going to happen with that plan to say, you know, I mean, I love the fact the state is looking at giving us $75 million for it. I just would like to see what the plan is. The city has already committed, I think, $50 million. And I still don't know what exactly we're looking at. I don't know where it's going. It needs to go in a place that will make sense in terms of our downtown development. But I, on its face, I love the idea. I just wish I knew more about the details of the plan.
The future of the Florida-Georgia game, not clear. We don't have a long-term agreement in place to keep it here. What's it worth to you to keep it?
Well, like the conferences are changing, so that's going to complicate things, and I'm not sure exactly where that will put the schools in terms of their even ability to be able to negotiate in a way that would make sense for everybody. But I hope we can keep it. It's a very long tradition and one that I think the people of Jacksonville take incredible pride in. I would hate to see us lose that game, and I think we can negotiate a deal that will make sense for the schools and for the city. But I think the question is, at the end of the day, will the realignment of the conferences wreak havoc there? I just don't know.
A lot of uncertainty, as we mentioned there. We know that the game is here through the this year's game, and we've heard that the Georgia coach, not such a fan. The proposition is, hey, it's a neutral site. So if there's a UF campus in Jacksonville, doesn't that give Georgia an out to say, hey, it's not a neutral site?
Well, I'm sort of surprised that Georgia coach is not a fan because they seem to do pretty well here most of the time, spoken as a true Seminole, I guess.
Florida State fan, right?
We sort of hear this every time the negotiations come around. There's a little bit of grumbling that it's not a neutral site, really, and it's. And the truth is, I think that the students love it, and I think it probably makes financial sense for the schools in the long term if we can create a deal that works. And I would love to keep it.
All right, thank you. All right, so out of time for this segment, but we've got more to come on our Vote 2023 Mayoral Candidate Forum. And when we come back, we'll continue asking questions important to you, our viewers and readers and the voters of Jacksonville. So stay with us. We're back in 2 minutes.
Premier Outdoors Spring Clearance Sale is here. Hot tubs, swim spas, outdoor kitchen, outdoor furniture, and more. Everything up to 50% off. This is the biggest sale we've ever had. The Spring Clearance Sale is here. Only at Premier Outdoor.
When clearing out and decluttering, it's simple. Donating your pre-loved items to Goodwill helps the environment by reducing waste. That's something you can feel good about. Donate to Goodwill of North Florida. We are Goodwill, removing barriers to employment.
At McGowan's, we have a motto that we start every day with. Do the right thing because it's the right thing to do. And that's the kind of company we are. We do the right thing by our customers. That's why when we do the work, we do it right the first time. professional, fast, and at a fair price. We want people to know when you reach out to McGowan's, we'll be there. Just like family, 24/7.
McGowan's Heating and Air, when it comes to comfort, trust Max.
Introducing the latest addition to the News4Jax app, Snapjacks. With Snapjacks inside the News4Jax app, it's now easier than ever to share what's happening in your community. Whether it's breaking news, weather, or just a fun local spot around town, Snapjacks gives you the power to share your news. And the best part? News4Jax insiders can now like and comment on photos and videos without ever leaving the app. Start connecting with your community through Snapjacks.
Premier Outdoor Spring Clearance Sale is here. Everything's up to 50% off. It's clearance pricing on everything. Hot tubs, swim spas, outdoor kitchens, outdoor furniture, and more. The Spring Clearance Sale, it's here, only at Premier Outdoor.
Top money mistakes at every age. Moves that people do and don't make that cost them in the long run. And simple tools to help start your emergency fund. Plus top-rated products you can get for a steal just in time for Mother's Day, Thursday.
And welcome back to our Vote 2023 Mayoral Candidate Forum tonight. I'm joined by three other local journalists: Anthony Austin of First Coast News, Melissa Ross of WJCT, and Nate Monroe of the Florida Times-Union. We're speaking with Democratic mayoral candidate Donna Deegan. Republican Daniel Davis was invited to participate but declined multiple invitations. So let's get back into our questions. Anthony, why don't you start?
And Mrs. Deegan, this is something you've talked about during your campaign, and you've talked about it tonight here at this forum, a culture of corruption in City Hall. That's something that you've mentioned before, and that it would continue with your opponent's administration. So let's talk a little bit more about what do you mean by that, any specific examples that you may have, and also, can you tell us how you would be transparent in city government and what might a Deegan administration look like?
Well, listen, I don't think I need to go any further than the example of what happened with JEA. You had a situation where the people in this city government were making decisions behind the scenes without the input, without the approval of the people of this city. My opponent, way back in 2007, actually wrote a letter when he was on city council, wrote a letter asking for the valuation of JEA. Nothing wrong with that if you want to start investigating privatization, but he continues to say he was not interested in privatization. When Al Ferraro said repeatedly on the campaign trail, he was driving that train. He was the person who was pushing for privatization. He continues to say he was not. But that entire process was very, very lacking in transparency. When he was as the chamber president, he recycled $325,000 of ratepayer money through the chamber to convince people the sky was falling and that we needed to do something different. To me, that's pretty shady. Okay, so I have to say, and if you take a look at just his record on council, he was investigated both in 2004 and 2007 for multiple Sunshine Law violations. Sunshine Law is those laws of transparency, which we're all asked to keep. But this has been endemic in this administration. It's not a secret, Anthony. This is how business is done. And if anyone steps out of line, they hear about it or they're gone. I think JEA is the perfect example of that, and I just don't think we want that same type. His campaign manager, who is involved in this current administration, his campaign manager was listed in the JEA report 44 times in that investigation. I just think there is a culture of lacking transparency, and we have got to move through that. I have said repeatedly, we lack accountability. So what we will do on day one is we will make sure, as I said, we're going to open up the doors and we're going to bring the people into City Hall, but we're also going to put accountability measures into everything. We give a lot of money to people. We have a $1.6 billion budget. People should be held accountable for how that money is being spent. Whether we're giving grants out for nonprofits or whether we're giving grants out for work, you know, any number of things that we do in this city, there need to be metrics to determine, Is that money showing us a return? Are we seeing a move on the dial of literacy or whatever the situation may be? We don't have any of that right now. And we give away sweetheart deals to the same developers over and over again who are the donors to my opponent. So I could talk all night about this, but I think that's a pretty good example.
One of our voters asked this question. Brenda Pollock submitted this question and said, what specific ideas do you have for building bridges of understanding to overcome the divisiveness which keeps Jacksonville from being all it can be?
Well, listen, my whole message this entire campaign has been about unity. I have not run one negative attack ad against my opponent. Now, I have spoken truth about him in forums where we've been together and not together, and I don't have any apology to make for telling the truth about things that he's done. I'm about the facts, but I've run no attack ads against him. And I will say that what I have said repeatedly that this city lacks, we have this most wonderful mosaic of people in this city, and yet we seem to divide ourselves into these silos because of the culture of this city. And I think that my hope is that when I become mayor, that the philosophy I have of seeing everyone, of bringing everyone in, of taking an approach of love for each other instead of fear. And that has been my mantra. Those of you who have known me a long time, that has been my mantra for many, many years. You cannot lead with fear. You must lead with love for your community. I think that hopefully the city will take on that personality. That is my hope and my prayer. And I will tell you that I believe that if you give people a stake in their city government, if you allow people in and let them participate in their city government, and you lift people as we rise in this city, that we can have everything that we have ever wanted because we'll be working at it together as opposed to working in silos and just for a handful.
Throughout the campaign, Daniel Davis has cast himself as the man in the room.
Yes, indeed.
Helping to cut the deals like the UF campus in downtown. He is a former member of the city council, a former member of the state house. The idea being he doesn't need on-the-job training.
Yes.
The implication being you might need on-the-job training. You want to address that concern?
Yeah, I mean, look, I am the only candidate in this race who is a problem solver. When I was diagnosed with breast cancer, look, first of all, in my 25 years on the anchor desk, I spent time holding people like Daniel Davis accountable for their actions in this city. But when I was diagnosed with breast cancer, I saw a need in this community. People were coming to me saying, we're praying for you, we hope you do well, but you should know that not all of us have the same opportunities you do. So I saw a lot of need, people choosing food or medicine. And I said, what can I do to solve that problem? So I from the ground up, visioned and built an organization that has helped more than 20,000 people, not only with their critical needs, but to help educate them about things like financial literacy and connecting them to other services that help them. And we've had a $60 million economic impact on the city of Jacksonville with the Donna Marathon. That is not a small thing. I'm the only person who's built something out of whole cloth for the people of this city. And frankly, we've both been nonprofit leaders. He's been a nonprofit leader who has helped, frankly, large, rich business people, and I've been one that has helped the voiceless in this community. And I'm not saying either one of those is better. I'm just saying that I don't see much of a difference between what he's done and what I've done recently in his life. But I think I am more of a leader than he is, because I have been that person that has seen the need and built something to address it.
Now, earlier in the show, you touched on resiliency. Mm-hmm. A study a few years back cited Jacksonville as the city in America with the most coastline, both oceanfront and inland coastline, because of our St. Johns River and all of its tributaries. We are uniquely vulnerable to the impacts of climate change, water rise, extreme heat, more extreme storms.
That's right.
This is already starting to happen, of course, and it's only expected to get worse. We do have a chief resilience officer now. Tell us more, though, about what you would do as mayor to further protect this city and make it more resilient.
Well, I'm just going to say, first of all, I think this is another difference between myself and my opponent. I think he is going to look to see from the eyes of developers how he can work this issue. From my perspective, we have to go the other way around. We have to say, look, we want development. We want all of this to happen in Jacksonville, but it has to be through the eyes of resiliency, because if you have a business, that's fantastic. But if you're sitting in the dark underwater on a street that you can't get to, it doesn't do you much good, right? So we've got to make sure that we're absolutely empowering our Chief Resiliency Officer. She's about to come out with a report over the summer on heat and flooding, which will be a good roadmap for us on where we need to direct our immediate attention. So in addition to creating less asphalt and more green spaces where we can actually drain some of that water in addition to making sure that we're taking care of our drainage and our roads and our bulkheads and all those things that are so vulnerable, we have got to set her free to really do the things that we need to do in this city to make sure that overall we have a resiliency plan for building, for people's livelihoods, to make sure that when, God forbid, one of these days we do have a direct hit from a hurricane and the water's coming up, you know, that we are ready for that. And we can't do it if we don't look at zoning and permitting in a different way. If we don't make sure that resiliency becomes the lead of everything else that we do.
Would you make her position more powerful? And how would we fund these resiliency measures? Now, you talked about more aggressively going after grant money.
Yeah, I don't think that's a small thing, Melissa.
But what else? How else? Because the price tag is expected to be prohibitive.
Well, you know what's going to be prohibitive? When we're underwater, that's what's going to be prohibitive. So this is the issue of our times right now. We're going to have over the next by 2050, I think what I heard is that we're going to have more days in the 90s. I can't remember how many days, but considerably more days in the 90s. We're going to have many more days where there is flooding in our city. We've got to start making that a priority. And I just have to say, leadership is about setting priorities and making sure that you go after that. So we've got to fund it. We don't have a choice.
Is that another tax increase eventually?
I'm not going to increase taxes when we have other options. I've had these discussions with people who are leading our cities, with people who are taking steps in places like Miami. There is a lot of money available to address these issues, and we just have to very intentionally go after it. I don't believe we need to raise taxes to do that.
All right. So there's a couple of questions, key questions we want to get to right at the end here, and I think we're just going to go right there right now. Melissa Ross, why don't you take this one, and then we'll have a final question for you.
All right. If you are elected mayor of Jacksonville, you will be the first female mayor in this city's history. How significant a milestone do you feel that would be for the people of Duval County and for you personally?
Well, you know, I haven't talked much about that because you don't want people to think that you're saying because you're a woman that people should vote for you. But I do think it would be incredibly significant. I would be so honored being a fifth generation Jacksonville native, someone who has spent my entire life here. My family has just been so embedded in this community. My cousin Tommy was our mayor. His wife Carol actually messaged me the other day and said, remember, there are no Republican or Democratic potholes. When you talk, remember there's no Republican or Democratic potholes. She said, you know, Tommy is smiling down on you right now and he's so proud of you. And I just have to say it would be such a point of pride for me to be able to lead this city as the first woman mayor. And I honestly, I think we would usher in a new era of collaboration in this city. That I'm very excited about. Women are really good at collaborating, I think.
We were really excited tonight to be able to collaborate as journalists and bring all these different questions to you. So we're kind of in that tipping point on whether or not I could ask another question or have to cut you off. So I am going to give one more question. If you want to ask this question, this viewer asked, Anthony, to you from voter Josh Melko.
Yeah, voter Josh Melko, he wants to know about JEA. I know in one of your campaign ads, you say you're the only candidate who is not involved in the JEA scandal.
Correct.
And he wants to know, what will you do to ensure we keep JEA as a community-owned utility. Do you believe there will be an effort to sell JEA in the future, and what is your position?
I do believe there will be an effort to sell it in the future. We have people within this administration very heavily connected to FP&L, which is a lot of money invested in this, and frankly, there was an effort at the state legislature this year. There were a couple of bills that would have made it very easy for this issue to come back and for whoever is mayor to make sure that this is not a city-owned utility anymore. And let me just be real clear about something. If we don't have JEA, if we, to use a term I don't like to use, defund JEA, we'd get a short-term sugar hit from that. Once spent, it would be gone. We get $122 million a year from JEA. And if we don't have that, we're defunding our parks, we're defunding our drainage, we're defunding our city in so many ways. We need to keep JEA local. And if I am the mayor, when I am the mayor of this city, I will absolutely do everything I can. Local rule is becoming a really big issue right now with the state legislature taking away so many of our abilities to govern locally, but in every way that I can, I will fight that.
Mrs. Deegan, thank you for participating in the forum tonight. Collaboration among these 4 different journalistic organizations. It's been a pleasure and somewhat historic tonight. So as we wrap up, is there a final statement, a closing statement you'd like to make tonight in a minute and a half or so?
Well, first of all, thank you all so much for giving me the opportunity to do this. I do wish that my opponent had been here with us tonight. I think that everyone benefits when they can see side by side what visions there are for the city. And I think if you're going to interview for a job as important as this, then you should show up and answer the questions that the citizens have. And I appreciate all of you at home, and I appreciate you all for asking me these questions. Listen, I love this city with all my heart, and I just want it to ultimately finally work for all of us. I believe that if we can come together in unity in this city, we can heal from this toxic culture, we can heal from this toxic environment that we're in, this political environment that has simply become untenable. We need to work together to make sure that Jacksonville is not a city of renderings, is not a high crime city that it has been for so long, is not a city that neglects half of its neighborhoods. And I can promise you that when I am the mayor of Jacksonville, I will make every effort to unify this city and make sure that we are a city that works for all of us. Because when we have each other's back, anything is possible. I thank you so much for your time, and I ask you for your vote.
All right, thank you. Donna Deegan, thank you very much. That wraps up our Vote 2023 Mayoral Candidate Forum. We thank our candidate for participating in this forum to help inform our viewers. And yes, thank you to our panelists. Anthony Austin of First Coast News, Melissa Ross of WJCT 89.9. You can listen all the time, every day. And then you can read our columnist, Nate Monroe in the Florida Times-Union. Appreciate each of you for being part of this. And everybody, remember, there's more on the ballot than just the race for mayor. There's also a race for property appraiser, city council races. And if you haven't already voted, then you can take advantage of early voting at any of the 19 sites citywide through Sunday, May 14th. Election day is May 16th, and you can vote at your designated precinct between 7 a.m. and 7 p.m. that day. I'm Kent Justice. Thanks for joining us tonight.